So this is a typical model of a school before integration occurred. I could put in a few, a few dates, but I won't do that because there's so many of them. And as I, research, I stumble across so many years. It goes back as far as 1849. It could go back even maybe further, but I believe this is the farthest. But it's entitled Brown versus Board. It's a timeline of school integration in the U.S., race and ethnicity. And so these are a compile of blogs and articles, and it goes through a timeline, and it starts with 1849 and it progresses all the way down to 2007. And so there's a whole history with education, believe it or not. And education has been a historical fight. So the issues that have come up or that have been raised by, I'm just spouting off some things that have come up from parents in the surrounding area where I reside, have been not enough black teachers, not enough black history taught in schools. It's being watered down, the black historical content in the U.S., some of the contributions that black people have played in U.S. history throughout. There's not enough diversity in staff in some of the schools, or education is watered down, or it's only targeting one specific group. If it's a larger number of a particular racial group, then that is what is taught. That is geared more towards like a favoritism issue, where it's geared towards that particular group. And then the other cultures that are there, or the lesser of the cultures, that if it's a less number, there's less favoritism towards that group. They're treated as almost unfavorable. There's been issues like that. There's also been an uninclusiveness of all cultures. It's just targeted towards maybe one or two cultures to succeed. And then you have schools that are underfunded. They have cut out a lot of extracurricular programs, and there's not enough socialization with some of the new schooling that has come out. We have homeschooling, and I believe some people say they like homeschooling. There's some parents that say they like homeschooling and they have it for a reason. Then there's some people say that that's just going to promote less social culture, where kids are allowed to be racist, or they don't have socialization with other cultures and experiences with other people. And so here you see a protest and people holding up signs, and this is the woman who is in charge. Her name is Betsy DeVos, and she is the U.S. Secretary of Education. Her name is Elizabeth D. DeVos, and she's an American businesswoman, philanthropist, politician, and an activist who is the 11th and current U.S. Secretary of Education. So she's been met with a lot of scrutiny on her practices and on her promoting vouchers, school vouchers, and also defunding public school education. And so there's a lot of controversy behind that. So it's true that education is key, and kids are the future, education is the future, and it helps the livelihood of people become productive citizens and productive adults. And These are some of the things that are surrounded with education. You have good teachers. Eventually, your kids, the goal is to send them to college, university, or to get into respectable jobs, um, so that they can become good citizens in the community and society. And so, cultures also, by being diverse, they're able to go out in the real world and uh, be productive citizens and be inclusive of other cultures and be in the know of other cultures as well. But we don't have a lot of that, and that's what some parents are worried, that there's not enough parent involvement, and then if there is parent involvement, it's only exclusive to one group or two groups, and that schools that have higher funding and have higher parent involvement usually are the schools that have children that come from wealthy backgrounds, and that there's this gap even in not only the race factor of it, but also wealth. In schools, it starts as early as pre-K, and what schools that you plan to put your kids in, and whether you can afford to put your kids in those schools. So these are some of the social issues that happen here in America that people are really concerned about, that impact everyone. Even people who don't think it impacts them, it does in some type of way, because these are the issues that have arisen on the news and on social media sites that have brought about protest and controversy as well. So if you want to talk about schools, you'd also want to talk about the teachers, and schools that are funded versus schools that are underfunded or they're threatening to pull funding from. So this is where the whole issue with Betsy DeVos, U.S. Secretary of Education, comes into play. So I also was looking at an article, and it's under what is called the National Education Association. So I'll just read a little bit of it in terms of blacks, African American, or black people. Education issues. The black community faces educational issues similar to other minority groups, including the need for adequate funding for schools serving minority and disadvantaged students, as well as other issues with special impact on the community. Student achievement gaps need to be aggressively addressed. For example, the percentage of blacks aged 25 and older with a high school diploma or more was 72% in the census of 2000 versus or compared to 85.5% of whites. In addition, the percentage of blacks with bachelor degrees or more was 14% compared to or of 27% of whites. So that's just a little bit right there. So conversation is needed, much conversation. I believe it starts with conversation, also more parent involvement, and more in the know. And a lot of people will bring up the issue of, are people that are in underserved communities really involved in their children's education, or is it just used as a babysitting tool or dumping ground for when they want to stay home? And then goes the welfare issue. And so that comes into play as well. So these are issues that have been talked about even long before we've been here. And it's been a onward battle. And so with that being said, you'll also see how testing plays a role based on race in education and in employment. So an SAT test is used to show here in 1995 the scores by race and education. So you see by color, and then it's color coded, it shows you the races and it shows you the higher end of the score, which is Asian and then white, and then underneath the lower end it'll show other cultures. So empowerment through education, living a dream, building a future. So education is building the future, but if you are from a community, or you're in a community where you're dealing with funding being pulled from your schools, or if your child is in a school where it has already issues with low test scoring, if you have teachers that are being underpaid, is that a result of how your children are learning? Is there diversity in staff? Or do they have just one group or two groups of staff members that are teaching? And is the teaching being taught as well-rounded or inclusive of all cultures? Or is it just very, what you call, narrow, and not really inclusive of all cultures, or it is watered down teaching that is only a model that is given to all teachers and they have to follow by that? So right now the big thing is Common Core in the public school systems here, even in the Los Angeles area. So some people do not like Common Core. They want to be done away with it, that as a model. And so education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world, which I believe so is true. So I will leave the link of Brown versus Board and the timeline, so you can see just how controversial education has been throughout many years, many decades. So these are issues worth looking into. Thanks for listening.